The whole neighborhood gathered outside the courthouse, not to celebrate, but to mock her. "She's marrying the cripple," they shouted. "What a waste." But when the black limousine pulled up 6 months later, those same people fell silent, and the girl they pitied became the woman they feared. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments what time it is and where you're watching from. Let's start. Grace wiped sweat from her forehead as she walked down the dusty road of Maplewood. Her worn boots dragged against the gravel. Her stomach growled loud enough for the birds to hear. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Her mama was sick at home, coughing in bed with no medicine. The rent was due in 3 days. Grace had knocked on 12 doors that week, begging for work. Every door had closed in her face. Sorry, honey. Times are tough for everyone. Grace didn't blame them. Maplewood was a small town where everyone barely had enough of themselves. But that didn't fill her empty stomach or pay for her mama's medicine. She turned the corner near the old general store and froze. A man sat on the ground, leaning against a brick wall. His legs were twisted beneath him, bent in ways legs shouldn't bend. His wheelchair sat empty beside him. A heavy burlap sack of corn lay toppled on its side, golden kernels spilling onto the dirt. "Mr. Carter," Grace whispered. Everyone in Maplewood knew James Carter. They called him Cripple Jimmy behind his back. Some folks said he'd been born that way. Others whispered about an accident when he was young. Nobody really knew. Nobody really cared enough to ask. What Grace didn't know was this. People laughed at him. They pointed. They turned their children away when he rolled past in his wheelchair. "He's useless," Mrs. Patterson once said at church. "Can't work. Can't walk. Lives off charity like a beggar." But right now, James wasn't begging. He was struggling. His strong arms strained as he tried to lift the heavy sack. His face turned red with effort. The sack barely moved an inch. Grace looked left. She looked right. The street was empty. She could walk away. Nobody would see. Nobody would judge her for helping the town outcast. But Grace's feet moved forward. "Let me help you, Mr. Carter." James looked up. His blue eyes were bright and clear, not broken like people said they should be. "You don't have to, miss. I know folks don't like being seen with me." "I'm not folks," Grace said. She bent down and grabbed one end of the sack. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. Together they heaved. The sack landed in the wheelchair's basket with a heavy thud. James smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that reaches eyes. "Thank you, Miss Grace. You've got a kind heart." "How do you know my name?" "Small town. I see more than people think." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 2 shiny apples. "Here, take these. You look hungry." Grace's cheeks burned. Was it that obvious? But her stomach answered for her with another loud growl. She took the apples. "Thank you. Meet me here tomorrow," James said. "Same time. I have a question to ask you." Grace walked home slowly, eating 1 apple and saving the other for Mama. That night, she wondered what question a crippled man could possibly have for a poor girl like her. The next day, Grace arrived at the same spot. James was waiting, sitting tall in his wheelchair. His shirt was clean and pressed. His dark hair was combed neat. "Miss Grace," he said, "I'll get straight to the point. I know your mama is sick. I know you have no money for rent or food. I know you're drowning." Grace's throat tightened. "How do you—" "I listen. People talk loud when they think a cripple can't hear." He rolled closer. "I want to help you, but I need something in return." Grace's heart pounded. "What?" "Marry me." The world tilted sideways. "What?" Grace whispered. "I'm serious. Marry me and I'll pay off your debts. I'll make sure your mama gets the best doctor in Boston. You'll never go hungry again." Grace stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm tired of being alone. Because people see my legs and think I'm worthless. Because you're the first person in years who helped me without being asked." His voice was steady, calm. "I'm not asking for love. I'm asking for companionship, a partnership. You need help. I can give it. I need someone who sees me as human. You already do." Grace's mind spun. Marry a cripple? What would people say? But then she thought of Mama's cough, the empty cupboards, the landlord's angry face. "If I say yes," Grace said slowly, "you promise my mama gets help?" "I promise." Grace took a deep breath. "Then yes, I'll marry you." James smiled that real smile again. "Thank you, Grace. You won't regret this." News spread through Maplewood like wildfire. "Did you hear? Grace Wilson is marrying crippled Jimmy. That poor girl. She must be desperate. It's a mercy marriage. She feels sorry for him." At the general store, Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "What a waste. Such a pretty girl. Throw her life away on a man who can't even stand." Her daughter Lucy laughed. "Maybe she's crazy. Or maybe she's after his charity money." Grace heard every word. She held her head high and kept walking. The wedding was small. No fancy church. No white dress. Just a simple ceremony at the courthouse with the judge and 2 witnesses. James wore a black suit that looked expensive, though Grace didn't know where he'd gotten it. She wore her mama's old Sunday dress, cleaned and pressed. "Do you, Grace Elizabeth Wilson, take this man to be your husband?" Grace looked at James. His blue eyes were steady, honest. "I do." "Do you, James Michael Carter, take this woman to be your wife?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. They whispered and pointed. Grace helped James into his wheelchair. She pushed him down the street toward his house on the edge of town. People stared. Some laughed. Others shook their heads in pity. But Grace didn't care anymore. She had made a promise. She would keep it. What she didn't know was this. The man in the wheelchair was keeping secrets. Big secrets. Secrets that would turn Maplewood upside down. Grace pushed James's wheelchair up the path to his house. She expected a rundown shack. Maybe a leaking roof. Broken windows. The kind of place a poor cripple would live. She was wrong. The cottage sat at the edge of town, surrounded by oak trees. The white paint was fresh. The porch was swept clean. Flower boxes hung beneath every window, filled with red geraniums. "This is your house?" Grace asked. "Our house now," James said quietly. Grace's hands trembled as she helped him inside. The door swung open. Grace gasped. The inside was beautiful. Wooden floors gleamed in the afternoon light. A stone fireplace stood against one wall. The kitchen was small but spotless, with copper pots hanging from hooks. Books lined shelves in the corner. Everything had a place. Everything was clean. "How do you keep it so nice?" Grace whispered. James smiled. "I may not walk, but my hands work fine. I clean. I cook. I read. I'm not helpless, Grace. Just different." That night, Grace made soup with vegetables from James's garden. Real carrots. Real potatoes. More food than she'd seen in months. James sat at the table across from her. "Tell me about your mama." Grace told him everything. How Mama used to sew dresses for the wealthy families in town. How the sickness came last winter and never left. How the medicine cost more than they could ever afford. "Tomorrow," James said, "we'll take her to Dr. Reynolds in Boston. He's the best lung doctor in Massachusetts." Boston? Grace's spoon clattered into her bowl. "That's hours away. The train tickets alone. Don't worry about money." James's voice was firm. "Just trust me." Grace wanted to ask how a poor cripple could afford Boston doctors, but she was too tired, too grateful. She nodded and finished her soup in silence. 3 days later, Mama was breathing easier. Dr. Reynolds had examined her, given her medicine, and promised she'd recover fully. Grace cried with relief. James paid the doctor in cash. Grace saw the thick stack of bills and her stomach twisted. Where did he get that kind of money? "James," she said on the train ride home, "how can you afford all this?" He looked out the window at the passing fields. "I've been saving for a long time." It wasn't a real answer, but Grace didn't push. He'd save her mama's life. That was enough for now. Back in Maplewood, life settled into a rhythm. Grace cooked. James tended the garden from his wheelchair. They talked in the evenings by the fireplace. Grace learned things about James that surprised her. He was smart, really smart. He read books about business and mathematics. He wrote letters to people in the city. He kept careful records in leather journals. Where are all these? Grace asked one night, pointing at the journals. Just notes, James said quickly. Too quickly. He closed the journal and changed the subject. Tell me about your dreams, Grace. What did you want to be before life got hard? Grace blushed. A teacher. I want to teach children to read. Then you will. James said simply, when the time is right. Grace felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not love, not yet, but something close. Respect, gratitude, hope. 2 weeks after the wedding, James made an announcement. We're going to Boston tomorrow. Pack a bag for 2 nights. Why? Grace asked. I have business to attend to. His blue eyes were unreadable. And I want you to see something. The train ride took 3 hours. Grace pressed her face to the window, watching farms turn into towns. Towns turn into the city. Boston was massive, buildings taller than trees. Streets packed with automobiles and trolleys. People everywhere moving fast, dressed in fine clothes. James didn't seem nervous. He navigated the city like he'd done it 1,000 times. A black automobile waited for them at the station. A driver in a crisp uniform opened the door. Mr. Carter, the driver said with a respectful nod. Welcome back, sir. Grace's heart hammered. Mr. Carter? Welcome back? They drove through the city, past shops and restaurants, past brownstone houses and churches. Then the automobile stopped in front of a skyscraper. Glass and steel reached toward the clouds. Gold letters above the entrance read, Henderson Group Holdings. Why are we here? Grace whispered. James turned to her. His face was serious. Because I need to show you who I really am. Grace's hands went cold. James wheeled himself to the entrance. Doormen in uniform rushed to help. Welcome back, Mr. Henderson, sir. Mr. Henderson? Grace followed in a daze. The lobby was marble and gold. A fountain bubbled in the center. People in expensive suits hurried past. Everyone nodded to James. Good morning, Mr. Henderson. Welcome back, sir. We've missed you, sir. They rode an elevator to the top floor. The doors opened to an office bigger than Grace's entire house back in Maplewood. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. A massive desk sat in the center. Paintings hung on the walls. A leather chair faced a view. James wheeled to the desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Sit down, Grace. Grace sat. Her legs felt like water. James handed her the folder. My full name is James Michael Henderson. I'm the heir to Henderson Group Holdings. My grandfather built this company. My father expanded it. When they died, I inherited everything. Grace's vision blurred. She opened the folder with shaking hands. Documents, bank statements, property deeds, numbers so big they didn't make sense. Millions, tens of millions. You're rich? Grace whispered. Yes. Then why? Tears filled her eyes. Why did you live in Maplewood? Why did you pretend to be poor? Why did everyone think you were a beggar? James rolled his chair closer. Because I needed to know. Know what? Who would stay when there was nothing to gain? His voice cracked. When my legs stopped working after the accident, people changed. Friends disappeared. Women who'd smiled at me turned away. Everyone saw a cripple, not a person. So I left Boston. I went to Maplewood with nothing but my wheelchair. I wanted to find someone who would see me. Not my money. Not my company. Just me. Grace's tears spilled over. And you found me. You helped me lift that sack of corn. You didn't laugh. You didn't turn away. You saw a man who needed help, and you helped him. James took her hand. Then you married me when you thought I had nothing. You chose kindness over judgment. You chose me when everyone said I was worthless. Grace couldn't speak. Her whole world had flipped upside down. I'm sorry I lied, James said softly, but I needed to be sure. And now I am. Grace looked at her husband, really looked at him. The strong arms, the bright eyes, the honest face. He wasn't a beggar. He wasn't worthless. He was James Michael Henderson, and he'd chosen her. What happens now? Grace asked. James smiled. Now we go home to Maplewood, and we show them what kindness really means. The black automobile rolled into Maplewood on a sunny Saturday morning. Grace sat beside James in the back seat. Her heart pounded like a drum. The driver parked in front of the general store, the busiest spot in town, where everyone gathered on Saturdays to buy supplies and trade gossip. Grace could see them through the window. Mrs. Patterson, Lucy, Mr. Thompson. At least 20 townspeople milled about inside. Are you ready? James asked. Grace took a deep breath. Yes. The driver opened the door. James wheeled himself out. Grace followed. Every head turned. Whispers started immediately. That's crippled Jimmy and his wife. What's that fancy car doing here? Who's the driver in the uniform? James rolled straight into the store. Grace walked beside him, holding her head high. Mrs. Patterson's mouth fell open. Well, if it isn't the charity case couple. Lucy snickered. Nice car. Did you steal it, Jimmy? James smiled calmly. My name is James Michael Henderson, not Jimmy, and I'd like to make an announcement. The room went silent. I am the owner and CEO of Henderson Group Holdings in Boston. My company is worth $47 million. I own factories, railroads, and properties across Massachusetts. Someone dropped a jar. It shattered on the floor. That's impossible, Mr. Thompson sputtered. You're a cripple, a beggar. I'm disabled, James said firmly, but I've never begged for anything in my life. I came to Maplewood 5 years ago to escape the city, to find people who would see me as human, not as a wallet or a charity case. Mrs. Patterson's face turned red. But you lived in that tiny house. You had no money. I had everything I needed, and I found exactly what I was looking for. James reached for Grace's hand. I found a woman who helped me when I struggled, who married me when she thought I had nothing, who showed me that true wealth isn't counted in dollars. It's counted in kindness. Grace squeezed his hand. Tears blurred her vision. Lucy's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No sound came out. Starting Monday, James continued, I'm establishing the Henderson Foundation for the Disabled right here in Maplewood. We'll provide wheelchairs, medical care, and job training for anyone with disabilities. Free of charge. Gasps echoed through the store. We're also opening a school, Grace added, finding her voice. A real school with books and supplies. Any child in Maplewood can attend. No fees. Mr. Thompson's eyes went wide. A school? Here. Yes, James said. My wife will be the head teacher. She's always dreamed of teaching children to read. Now she will. Mrs. Patterson stumbled backward. Her face had gone pale. I had no idea. We all thought. You thought I was worthless because I couldn't walk, James said quietly. You laughed. You pointed. You taught your children to avoid me. But the joke was never on me. It was on all of you who couldn't see past my wheelchair. The silence was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad, James continued. I'm telling you this so you'll remember, never judge a person by what they look like on the outside. The poorest person might be rich in character. The person you mock might be the one who changes your town forever. Grace's tears spilled over. She'd never been prouder of anyone in her entire life. Lucy stepped forward. Her voice was small. I'm sorry. I was cruel to you both. I laughed when I should have been kind. One by one, others stepped forward. I'm sorry, too. Forgive me. We were wrong. James nodded. Apologies accepted. Now, let's build something better together. 6 months later, Maplewood had transformed. The Henderson Foundation building stood on Main Street, bright and welcoming. Inside, people in wheelchairs learned carpentry, typing, and accounting. Jobs were found. Lives were changed. The school opened with 30 students. Grace taught reading every morning. Her face glowed with joy as children sounded out words and discovered stories. Mama recovered fully and helped at the foundation. teaching sewing classes to anyone who wanted to learn. The townspeople who'd once mocked James now greeted him with respect, not because of his money, but because they'd learned their lesson. One evening, Grace and James sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "Do you regret it?" Grace asked. "Leaving Boston? Living in a small town?" James took her hand. "Never. I found something in Maplewood that all the money in the world couldn't buy." "What's that?" "You. A partner who sees my worth. A wife who chose me when there was nothing to gain. That's the real treasure, Grace. That's the real fortune." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder. "I chose you because you were kind, because you saw me when I was invisible, because you helped Mama when no one else would. We saved each other," James said softly. And it was true. A rich man had pretended to be poor to find real love. A poor woman had shown kindness to find her true destiny. Together, they built a legacy not of money, but of mercy, not of judgment, but of generosity. Maplewood would never forget the lesson. True fortune lives in a heart that refuses to turn away. Wealth fades like morning mist, but kindness creates a crown that lasts forever. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. True wealth isn't about money. It's about the kindness we show when no one is watching. Drop a comment telling us. Have you ever helped someone everyone else ignored? Have you ever been judged unfairly? Your story matters. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales that remind us what really matters in life. Remember, the person you help today might be the one who changes your tomorrow. The one you mock might be the one who transforms your world. Never judge by appearances. Always lead with kindness, and believe that destiny rewards those who see the worth in others. Share this story. Let it spread. Let it remind the world that love, dignity, and compassion are the truest treasures we can ever find. What lesson will you take from Grace and James's story? Tell us in the comments below. And remember, you never know who's watching when you choose to be kind. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story. Stay kind. Stay blessed.